Are Canadians still boycotting the USA? That's the topic I want to spend a few minutes talking about today. I'm sure most people who click on a video like this are aware that early in Trump's second presidency, specifically when Donald Trump started to make a lot of comments about Canada being the 51st state, and then threatening tariffs against Canada, there started to be a very strong movement of anti-Americanism and calls to boycott everything American from, Canadians from coast to coast. This was unlike anything I've seen in my lifetime. Though I think it's fair to say there have always been some Canadians who see themselves as, oh, we're not American, we're Canadian, and try to distance themselves from the USA. There's always been some of that, but deep down there's always been a bond between the two countries. And so to see things take the turn that they took here in 2025 is very surprising, I would say. Now, the question now, as the months have passed, we're in the middle of August right now. It's been probably about 6 months since this whole trade war talk began. But at the beginning of the trade war, it was Canada and I think Mexico who were the first countries that were being targeted. But a lot of it was specifically against Canada. And so now we have now it's the whole world is being tariffed. So it's every day you wake up, there's a new tariff. It's all right, what's going on? And so it seems like a less direct attack on Canadians and more oh, Grandpa Trump woke up on the wrong side of the bed and decided to just yell at some clouds for some random reason. That's what it feels like today. But Canada continues to be tariffed. Our former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau resigned, and the new Prime Minister Mark Carney, who we should note has a background in world trade and economics, he in some sense, though the Liberal Party of Canada will never directly admit this, I imagine, you could see him being picked as a direct response to Trump and Trump's actions with the trade war. That is how important it was. That is how potentially devastating Trump's actions were to Canadians, that we actually picked a new leader. This is my theory. I'm not saying this is entirely accurate, but we picked a leader who would be best suited to deal with Trump. Even more so, perhaps, in Canadian interests, because it's worth pointing out that the Conservative Party of Canada was leading the polls before Trump did all his nonsense and likely would have been elected. Pierre, the other Canadian party leader, probably would have won if it weren't for Trump stirring the pot so much that it led to this rise in Canadian nationalism and people saying, oh, who can combat this Donald Trump guy? And Mark Carney of the Liberal Party seemed like a natural pick, whereas Pierre, the Conservative guy, just seemed like he would cower to Donald Trump in the way that so many other Conservative politicians like J.D. Vance and all the others, all these people just grovel at his feet like he's some untouchable master. No, we wanted something different, someone who would actually stand up. And I think it's been perceived that Mark Carney certainly has more respect from Donald Trump than Trudeau did. There seemed to be some bad blood between Trudeau and Trump. Maybe Trump was just jealous of Trudeau in many ways. Trudeau's the anti-Trump. Whatever the case, Mark Carney is here, a new leader's here, 6 months have passed. But there still are tariffs. So how are Canadians feeling today? Well, I can tell you, first of all, that travel to the U.S. continues to be significantly lower than usual. Anyone who checks a map can tell you that, America is our only land border, right? You go to a Canadian airport, half the flights are to the United States. We naturally travel a lot between nations. There used to be, I don't know if people still do this, but there used to be a time where people living in Vancouver and other big cities near the border would cross to the United States just to fill their truck up with gas because it was cheaper in the US, and then they drive back. Or they'd buy groceries at Trader Joe's because we don't have Trader Joe's grocery store, and then they drive back, you know. Which is pretty funny to think about. But that's how intertwined our nations were. I think those days have passed, for the most part. I think Canadians are still second-guessing trips to the U.S., both out of respect for our own country and our own country's sovereignty, but also out of potential fears around the U.S. with all the ICE stuff that's really ramped up since the trade war began. If I was a Latino Canadian or even a Middle Eastern Canadian or a Black Canadian, you know, I don't know if I would want to go to the U.S. just out of fear of the racial discrimination that seems to be increasingly normalized every day. Particularly if I was from like Venezuela or El Salvador, or one of those countries that, one of my best friends actually is he was born in El Salvador, but he grew up in Edmonton, Canada. Shout out to Boris, great guy. He's a doctor, living and working in Alberta right now. Really cool friend of mine. And Boris, well, I've never actually asked his opinion on Trump and all that stuff down there, but I can tell you he's someone who stands up for human rights and stands up for a lot of things Trump doesn't. So I think and when I reflect on the fact that someone like Boris would probably be racially discriminated against just based on his name, just based on his country of birth, just for entering the United States, it makes me sad, you know, and that makes me not want to travel there, perhaps even more than the trade war stuff, because tariffs are important, but I feel like the outrage about the tariffs, like, it's still ongoing a little bit, but you know, at the beginning we were responding by, like, no one was buying anything American. It was like boycott everything. At this point, like, if I'm buying strawberries and I see American strawberries and Canadian strawberries, I'll buy the Canadian ones. Why not? Do we make strawberries in Canada? I'm not actually sure. But if we do, in this hypothetical reality where we do, I'll buy those Canadian strawberries. But if I'm really craving strawberries, or someone asks me if I can pick up strawberries, and there's only American ones, and there's nothing else, I'll probably buy them. I'm not doing a total boycott of everything American. And I feel like most Canadians aren't at this point. Some people in the comment section might jump on my back and say I'm a bad Canadian for saying that, or that's not true. There could be pockets of people who are still really intensely going about the boycott, but I feel like, for the most part, you know, my iPhone's getting old. If it stops working one day, I need to buy a new iPhone. I'm not going to buy some Huawei phone or something just to stick it to Donald Trump. And also, there's no Canadian iPhone to buy. You know, the sad reality is we have a lot of things that we don't make in this country. And we should hold on to this moment and remember that this is an important moment to actually build more things at home and change that. Make it so we do have good alternatives, you know. BlackBerry is a Canadian company. We used to have a very good phone maker. Gen Z will be too young to remember that, but millennials will know what I'm talking about. The BlackBerry phone where you had the physical keyboards. Those were very popular there for a minute. Pre-iPhone, that was like the cool phone to have, you know. I never had one. I wasn't cool enough to have one. I was also pretty young. But I did have a Motorola flip phone though. What's it called? The one that the Razr. Yeah, I had a Razr. So I was still kind of a cool kid. The Razr was awesome. But what am I talking about? The point is, I think most Canadians will continue to travel less to the U.S., possibly for the entirety of Trump's presidency. You know, I think it's more, there's just a general feeling of, it's crazy down there. We don't want to go down there. We don't want to get involved in that mess. And that's bigger than the tariffs. That's a general protest against the state of the United States of America. Tourism is way down in Las Vegas, which is a city that usually holds a lot of conferences and events. A lot of big organizations who might have their retreat or their conference in Las Vegas are saying, hey, you know what, this year we'll do it in Vancouver, or this year we'll do it in Amsterdam. You know, we're just, without anyone even having to be like, I'm not going to America, or being like a hardline anti-American, there's just a general feeling of maybe not the best time, regardless of whether you can actually get a visa or the political message you're sending by traveling there. There's just a general feeling of, haven't heard any good news out of that place in a while, we're not going there. And it might surprise some Americans to hear that that's how a lot of the world feels about the United States right now. It's just things aren't looking so good, and at least from my perspective, it's not even like an anger anymore. There's no sense of anger at Donald Trump for what he's doing to Canada. It's more of a like, is everything okay down there? Americans, like, are you okay? Because it kind of seems like you're not okay. It's like when you see a friend who's an alcoholic and things are just getting worse and worse every week. You're just like, you know, I'm not even mad anymore. I'm just disappointed and a little bit concerned. I think that's most Canadians. Well, I can't speak for most Canadians, actually, but that's my opinion on the matter. And if you're watching this video this far, I'd be happy to hear what you think as well. As always, I'm Dan, and I will catch you next time.